Lethal Company is a game which needs no introduction. Horror game meets extraction shooter, you delve into abandoned facilities in search of valuable items to sell to a mega corporation to stave off your inevitable termination. The developer Zeekers is a genius horror developer who previously made the YouTube rounds for the excellent Pac-Man-esque horror minigame-a-thon It Steals, as well as making the title we're going to be talking about today, Dead SEATER. Why is it called Dead SEATER, you may ask? Well, that's a spoiler, so why don't we just get straight into the game. Our main character pulls up in a van into the middle of nowhere, and you can see immediately that much like It Steals and Lethal Company, this game has that signature retro aesthetic. This whole ordeal reminds me a lot of old Resident Evil, with tank controls and the strangely unsettling spying fixed camera angles. It almost makes you feel like an unwitting victim walking into a surveilled lair. A lot of the exposition in this game is provided through monologue from our main character, which I'll read in this voice.
My name is Jesse Vincent. My parents named me that. I miss them. Today, Father is coming home. It's been so long since I saw him, I have to get the house in order.
We reach a fork in the road. To the left, a trail, and to the right, a house. In the interest of being thorough, I went to check out the trail first and got this monologue.
This trail leads down to Mitten Creek. That's where my kids would play, if I had a family of my own.
Interesting. Approaching the house then, we can see the front door is boarded up. If this is Jesse's house, if he lives here and is inviting his father over, why would the door be boarded up? Pressing on, we can see over the fence here a crowbar lying against the wall, but it looks like we'll have to go all the way around the house to get to it. On the way there, we get this wonderfully creepy camera work of something seemingly watching us from within the house. Very spooky. Once we get around to the side of the house, Jesse says this.
The shed is unfinished. I'm going to make it look like the one my father built.
Walking past the frame of a shed in question, we get to the crowbar and can pick it up. Night is fast closing in, so I head towards the front door when we get this piece of monologue.
My brother wouldn't help me paint this side of the house, but it's always in the shadow, so I never bothered.
I don't know if this is specific enough to be called foreshadowing per se, however this line takes on a very different meaning on a second playthrough. Using the crowbar on the door, we can pry off the boards, giving us access to the house. Honestly, for a boarded up house, the whole place is surprisingly better kept than I expected. All the lights work, there's no obvious damage, and it's all furnished. In this closet, we find this little shiny thing, which is the game's stand-in for small items, and turns out to be a key to the upstairs bedroom. In another room, I find a basement key, and I don't like the sound of that. In fact, Jesse agrees with me. He says,
I never, ever went into the basement.
Ultimately, however, I put on my big boy pants and make the descent, and oh boy, is it a descent. After going down the 3 stories of stairs, we are plonked straight into a pitch black room, with not a light switch in sight. After unlocking a door, I stumble through until I find my way into this sort of utility tunnel, the walls being adorned with all kinds of pipes and wires, and just overall looking far too high-tech to be under this random guy's house. I find my way to some storage rooms off to the side, where I get a key to the laundry room. And then the lights go out. I weasel my way out like a brave boy, but quickly break into a sprint when I hear noises down the hall. Back upstairs, I find this room, which I overlooked on my initial entry, appearing to be Jesse's office. It's deemed safe, whatever that means, and is therefore the only room in the game where we can save. Heading upstairs next, I unlock one of the bedrooms, which has 2 interesting items. For one, a weirdly well-physicked cloth simulation, and a bookcase hiding a massive hole in the wall behind it. a dark room being visible on the other side. Well, it looks like we're going to need to find something to break through. You might have realised by now that the core gameplay loop of the game is exploring the house, finding keys to unlock new rooms, which hold more keys, and on and on and on and on and on and on. It certainly works well to build tension, but it's boring as hell to watch. So I'm going to focus less on where I'm going and where I am and what's happening, and more just talk about the interesting bits. When I'm approaching the laundry room downstairs, Jessie has this to say.
I think I have a perfect family. And our neighbours, too.
That's nice, Jessie. That's really nice.
I built this house whilst my brother got a job far away, and my mother sold her business. We had neighbours down the road. They moved away too, like my brother, but they're back now.
This is another one of those lines which is going to sound so much different after seeing the end of this game. Back in the basement, because that's where all the fun stuff happens, you can see something turn off the lights behind us as we leave. Something down here really hates the lights.
I'm happy my father is coming home. It shouldn't be long.
Upstairs in the spare room, I stumble around for a few minutes, not really knowing what I'm meant to be looking for, completely missing the sledgehammer right in the middle of the room. I do eventually find it, and this looks like our key through that cracked wall in the bedroom. I swagger my way over and... what the fuck was that? I mistook it at the time for a knock at the front door, but it's gonna become very obvious where it came from soon. Anyway, so we bust through the wall in one big swing, opening up this weird hidden room where we can find another key to a room in the basement. Yay!
When we came to our father's house as kids, my brother always liked to play on his old computer. For some reason, I was scared of that computer. I was only 8.
Imagine being scared of a computer. This time, the key is for the locked box outside, and again, the lights cut out. As if I hadn't learned enough times that it does not like a light. I steadily walk back through, turning them on, and then... the fuck? Okay, so now we've established that it isn't just a walking simulator. What the fuck was that? The tip on the death screen says...
VNBs are sensitive to light. It's better to leave them in the dark, but don't get too close either.
MB? What does MB stand for? Motherboard? My brother? Metallic beast? There is, I believe, a correct answer to this, but that will become more clear later on. Foolishly, the last time I saved was before I got the key to the room that the sledgehammer was in, so I have to redo all of that, remember to save, and then this time sneak past the MB in the dark, successfully not alerting it. From the lockbox we get a key for the sewer, so I guess we're going straight back down to the basement. What I didn't expect to find was a whole massive sewer tunnel, which would fit right in a city, but out here in the boonies makes zero sense. Across the other side is a little room with another door where you can hear the distant drones of classical music. Heading back with a key, I get the shit scared out of my body by this audio jump scare which I genuinely believed for the moment was an MB, although the illusion was shattered when I ran out of the room and the audio cut. It was a stark reminder that we don't really know what's in this room, with no light switches and with us not yet possessing a light of our own. The key I received was for the second spare bedroom, so I get my fucking neck snapped, apparently. The tip this time says,
You can only run. Survive the DSP long enough, and it might go back into hiding.
Yet another mysterious acronym. Digital signal processing? Dark side Phil? In all seriousness, the working theory I had while playing was Dead SEATER phenomenon. In all seriousness, The working theory I had while playing was dead SEATER phenomenon, although there is a much more satisfying answer later in the game. Anyway, I forgot to save, so straight back down to the sewer we go. This time, I remember to save before I go upstairs, and position myself in the optimal position to book it right when the DSP emerges. As you can see from my expert movements, the tank controls are not conducive to an effective escape, and I'd go as far to say that the camera angles and horrific control scheme are designed specifically to disorient you in a situation like this. Ultimately, I actually run headlong into the thing, having assumed it would just come down the corridor behind me. Okay, so attempt 3. This time, I wait to make sure it follows me this way, but it still seems to prefer coming through the kitchen. However, I am able to evade it, and by the time I get back to the far corner, it appears to have gone back into hiding. I obviously save, desperate to not have a repeat of this, and then head to open the second spare room door, and lo and behold, there's a fucking MB right in the middle of the room, which I seem to have just mistook for furniture. Imagine my surprise when I turned on the light, although fortunately it seems if you turn the light back off fast enough, the thing returns to dormancy. Just a quick editor's note here, it actually appears that this MB is broken, which is actually kind of important for something in the story later. So yeah, it's not actually that I'm just so fucking amazing I turned the light off in time. The MB is just actually broken and wouldn't have attacked me even if I'd left the light on.
Everything will be okay.
Thanks, Jesse, I really needed that.
I'm getting married in 2 days. Everyone will be there.
That seems to explain why his seemingly estranged father is visiting all of a sudden. But where is his wife to be? Using the factory key I got from the room with the MB, we open this door and enter the factory. Jesse has been feeding this story that he built the house himself. But with just the scale of this room, it seems impossible. He even says it himself.
I never knew how big the basement was.
He supposedly built this house, and yet he didn't know how big the basement was that he built. Furthermore, after we climb some stairs up to the catwalks above, we can see that there's shipping containers here. How did they get in? Certainly not through the door. The guy can't even finish a shed, so how can we believe he's done all the work to build this? Moving on, I get my shiny doohickey, go through the door it unlocks, and then sprint directly into a headlock from the DSP. This, people, is what real fear looks like. You can almost see me jump out of my chair through the screen. Okay, so we can give this another go now. I reverse up to the door and give myself a flying start. However, with the restricted view and mono audio, it's nearly impossible to keep track of the thing. I do escape it ultimately, but it gets close in places, and I was quite lucky. The next key is for the backstage room, which turns out to be that one in the sewers, which we could hear the classical music from. The room which the music is playing from is still a bit further, and we seem to need to find a fuse to enter. From this room we also get the attic key.
As I built the house, my mother moved away and seemed to disappear. And I suppose my brother has no time of his own anymore. So I kept myself busy. I kept building my house as they left me in the dark. But father was always there. In different places, but always there.
Don't do autopilot and horror games, kids, as I managed to walk directly into an MB without even realising it. I quickly retrace my steps and take the right way around, although you can see a few of the fuckers twitching around the house now. In the attic we find a large hole in the roof which you can walk out of to find the next designated shiny item, being a key to the control room down in the factory. We also get this little mining helmet, allowing us to take a light wherever we want. I hope the implications of this dawn on you faster than it dawned on me.
I never ever went into the basement. Oh, Jesse, why didn't you go into the basement? Did you think I would go away? Did you think I would stay down here?
Now this is getting interesting. There appears to be more than one voice in Jesse's head. There's something trapped down here, and it has a grasp on Jesse. Maybe that's why the door was boarded up. Jesse tried to escape and stop himself from coming back, but it clearly didn't work forever. This creepy music and dialogue was definitely meant to go along with finding out what's in this room, which was this. Yeah, that room we've walked through at least a dozen times. It's a murder scene. A multi-murder scene. Was this the voice's work? Was it Father's? Or did the DSP do this? Is the DSP the voice? Some of these questions will be answered. Entering the control room, I can pull this lever which moves one of the shipping containers in the catwalks above, assumedly opening up a path to another key. Working my way up, I shine my torch directly at an MB. Oops. It does appear, however, that we get a moment's grace period before it enrages, so I have time to avert my beam. I quickly learnt to keep my beam generally aimed towards the floor, and to not aim it somewhere I can't see, which gets me through the catwalks unharmed, and I get to the key for the second lockbox. Much to my dismay, I find that all the MBs have moved and blocked my original path, so I have to work out another way around. The factory floor is now also covered in them, so I do my damnedest to avoid them all. Back at the ground floor, the game plays its most dastardly trick yet, the DSP emerging as I'm mere feet away from the save room. I again overestimate its speed and almost run headlong into it here, although fortunately it demanifests moments away from reaching me. I rush to save before the game can throw any more issues at me, and then head around the house towards the back garden where we will find the lockbox next to where the crowbar was earlier. Finally given the opportunity to shine a light on the house's northern face, we can see that it certainly was painted, just not in the way we thought. No wonder Jesse's brother didn't want to help. In this game's typical fashion, as soon as I pick up the key for the third lockbox, the garden is suddenly filled with MBs. I get the sense that something is fighting against us doing whatever it is we're trying to do, and as we're getting closer, it's ramping up. This feeling is only amplified once I open the final lockbox and receive a fuse, and upon going downstairs, we start our final DSP encounter. Whew, it was the fastest one yet. I'm sure glad it's all. Stopping to turn my light back on there got me killed, but it's near impossible to navigate in the dark, so we're gonna have to figure something out for the next try. My second attempt, I didn't even make it to that second stage, lapping the little bastard just as the chase was about to end. Attempt 3, I accidentally corner myself in a little room during the second stage and get neck hugs from the DSP. Attempt the 4th, I do the exact same thing. Attempt 5, I manage to not trap myself and ultimately do escape, now free to go and place the fuse in the backstage room.
Sometimes you don't get what you want, and you shouldn't. I'm so happy I did.
We enter into a room filled with dead, seated people. DSPs. Jesse knows them all. A friend, the neighbours, his brother. There's an empty chair. Mother sat there once. She was the DSP, which has been chasing us all this time. We can note some significant DSPs, but I'm not going to go through all of them. Such as Jesse's fiancée Kate, who he was meant to be married to in 2 days. There's a police investigator, who was, let's be honest, probably investigating all of these missing people. Jesse's doctor, who says he can't help him. And Jesse's Uncle Luke, who Jesse thinks was lonely until he seated him. We can enter into this red door at the back, and we see the police investigator twitch. They're still trying to stop us.
It's time to meet Father out on the road.
I sure hope, for his sake, that he hasn't shown up.
Father, I'm coming.
Unfortunately, Father was already here. He's been here the whole time, tied up in the back of the van we arrived in.
Father, I finally found you. I was so lonely after I built the house. If only I'd known. You were all waiting for me, down there, in the basement. But how could I have known what I was doing? Gathering you, all this time. Oh, what a gift! I was too afraid to spoil it. If I'd been bolder, I might have refused it. Maybe that's the lesson I would have learnt from all this. But when he was asleep, I built the basement, and we never spoke. Then Jesse found his family. He locked up the house and ran, and so I forced him into the creek. We haven't breathed or woken since, but gifts are for having. Welcome home, Father. I built this house for you to admire. That's what I want, and that's what you'll do. That's my gift. I have another metal body for your soul to squirm in. It's waiting for you, and nothing can change that. Goodbye, Father. Welcome. The show is just beginning. Father? And if you had another head, couldn't you see twice as far? So the devil said.
So that's a lot to chew on. I think we should just start with a quick recap so everything's fresh in our minds. Jesse returns home in a van with his father tied up in the back. The front door of his home is boarded up from the outside, and all of the doors are locked with keys spread around the home, seemingly at random. I can only really come to one conclusion here. Someone really doesn't want Jesse to reach the stage room in the basement, and have clearly gone to great lengths to ensure that he doesn't. Not only this, but the reanimated corpse of his mother haunts the halls of this house for the same ends, desperately trying to stop Jesse from seating the final corpse. The MBs, or metal bodies, I'm not so clear on as I am with the DSP. I think that maybe the bodies, after being sent down into the pit, were returned as both a DSP and an MB, in a sort of separation of body and soul. As in Jesse's monologue, he says he has a metal body for Father's soul to squirm in. Jesse does eventually reach the basement and finds the stage room full of the seated corpses of all of his family and neighbours. In the next room, we can see some sort of cage dangling above a pit of unknown depth. Jesse returned to the surface, retrieved his father, and lowered him into the pit, after which some sort of creature emerges, presumably killing Jesse. It's customary for quirky horror video essayists to chalk all of this up to some sort of deep metaphor about life, but I'm going to do my own thing. Let's see what kind of batshit theory we can come up with if we take all of this at sort of face value. To start, I think that the voice that's been speaking to us the whole time isn't Jesse, Although some of the things that are said are things that Jesse would say, maybe sort of his lingering consciousness in the body. I interpreted the part about the creek in the ending monologue as meaning that Jesse had been harbouring some sort of invasive consciousness which was influencing his actions, and ultimately killed Jesse to assume full control. For simplicity reasons, we're going to call the two sides Jesse and SEATER. The most obvious place we can see this separation is when SEATER first hints at his own existence. Jesse says,
"I never ever went into the basement."
and SEATER replies,
"Oh Jesse, why didn't you go into the basement? Did you think I would go away? Did you think I would stay down here?"
I think that all the monologue in the game can either be attributed to SEATER or to Jesse's consciousness kind of slipping through, although sometimes it can be ambiguous as to which of the two it is, such as in the quote,
"But father was always there. In different places, but always there."
It doesn't really make any sense for Jesse's actual father to be sort of skulking around the house in this way, but we also don't really have any precedent for SEATER having a father, so I'm not clear on who it is. If it is Jesse, we could interpret this as Jesse's father being judgmental and controlling, watching Jesse's every move, which isn't really evidenced elsewhere but does play into the dysfunctional relationship Jesse seems to have with his parents and other people around them, never seeing them and all. On the other hand, if SEATER is saying this, then it suggests that the thing that exits the pit at the end of the game might not actually be SEATER, but some sort of higher being that SEATER is the harbinger of, and that it has had an influence in the world before we ultimately summon it. These aren't mutually exclusive, it could have meaning from both of them, but ultimately the answer to this isn't that important to what I think the ultimate plot of the game is. The relationship between Jesse and SEATER prior to heading down to the creek is further explored in the ending monologue, where SEATER talks about how he built the basement while Jesse slept. This says to me that originally Jesse would be in control during the day, which is when he built the house, and then when he would normally sleep, SEATER would take control and he worked to build the basement. It still doesn't really explain how the factory room was built and the containers brought in, but I'm willing to see it as a simple oversight on the developer's part, rather than speculate on the various theories I had of old government conspiracies or transhumanist cults. This setup is broken when Jesse either goes down to the basement of his own volition, or wakes up while SEATER is working down there, and finds his family in the stage room, which leads him to lock the doors and hide the keys, as well as barricading the front door. We know from the monologue that when SEATER finally reawakens, he drives the body into the creek where he presumably drowns them. As he says in the monologue,
"We haven't breathed or woken since."
As we know that SEATER is present when Jesse isn't, we can presume he now has full control, although as I said it appears there is still some residue of Jesse's consciousness in some of the monologue. SEATER is now free to track down Jesse's father, the final body required seated before the entity awakens in the pit, which brings us to the start of the game. We know what happens during the game, but after the entity awakens and the ending cutscene plays out, we see a quote in the darkness which reads,
"And if you had another head, couldn't you see twice as far?" So the devil said.
This stumped me for a long time, and I genuinely delayed this video because I couldn't let myself finish until I knew what this meant. Driving home from work one day, I was just idly thinking about the game when I think I figured it out, and it ties a nice bow around a lot of the plot of the game. I think that this very innocuous quote gives us the key to know how all of this situation started. I want to start with a literal interpretation of the quote to lay some groundworks. The distance you can see is only really limited by obstruction, since I can look up into the sky and see a star which is a million light years away, but I can't see my desk for the keyboard I'm writing this on. In this way, having a second head has no benefit for sight. You can see just as far, since the eyes on both heads will largely be obstructed by the same objects, especially at distance. This all seems very obvious, but when we get to the final part of the statement it gets a bit more interesting. "Or so the devil says" suggests that this statement, almost an offer of a second head, is deceptive in nature. It's being put forward by the devil as a trick, perhaps telling the receiver he can give them a second head and allow them to live twice as far, but for a cost. Put a pin in that for a moment. We know that Jesse's relationship with his family is in some way dysfunctional. He's not seen his parents in a long time. There was that possible suggestion that his father was controlling. He talks about how his different family members moved away as he built the house. He says that his kids would play in the creek, if he had any. But like, the guy is a fiancé. If he wants kids, he could talk to her about it. But the fact that he doesn't could suggest there's friction or disagreement between them, in whatever form that takes. He says that everything will be okay as if it isn't now. He built the house while they, quote, left him in the dark, and he felt discarded and outcast. There is an obstruction between him and the people in his life. A wall has been erected, and not necessarily always by him. And then he encounters SEATER somehow, our proverbial, but maybe not so proverbial devil. And SEATER tells him perhaps all he needs is a second head to see twice as far. Perhaps if I help you, Jesse, we can bring them back together, and we can reach beyond this wall. I will help you fix these relationships, Jesse. You won't ever be lonely again. I will bring them all together. All together for you, Jesse. All you need do is let me in. And he does. SEATER sets to work, builds the basement, and begins to bring the people from Jesse's life to the pit. The dead are seated, and the souls are transferred into the MBs. They're all here. But physical proximity does not mend Jesse's loneliness, because the problem was not how far Jesse could see, how great he could love, but the walls that were in his way. Jesse could not see twice as far, could not love twice as much, because the problem was not solved. The obstruction was not cleared, and is in fact greater now with his family members being literal fucking corpses. To spell this out without my poetics, the original quote is obviously false. 2 heads doesn't make you see twice as far, because the distance you can see is limited by physical obstructions, not by how many eyes you have. The promise by the devil to give you 2 heads is deceptive. You get nothing and pay whatever price he decides. Jesse's relationships are obstructed. He has built a metaphorical wall a la Pink Floyd, and finds himself completely cut off from his family and friends. He encounters SEATER, who promises he will bring them all back to Jesse, and he does in his own twisted way, which does nothing to actually fix Jesse's problems. Not only are their souls now contained in MBs, but nothing has actually been done to mend the relationship. The obstruction's still there. Jesse is being given the metaphorical second head, the assistance from SEATER to fix his relationships, but his solution does nothing to actually fix the relationships, and Jesse has paid the ultimate price by letting SEATER into his head. That's the bulk of what I think is explainable from the information we have, although there are a few loose ends I want to tie up. Firstly, I asserted that when a body is sent into the pit, it's returned as both a DSP, being the body, and the MB, containing the soul. If that's the case, then how come Mother is able to chase us in her own body? Well, we can see in this spare room upstairs a broken down MB, so it's possible that this MB containing her soul was accidentally destroyed by Jesse or SEATER, and this allowed her to repossess her body. The fact that both the MBs and the DSP are always hostile to us further lends credence to the fact that they are the souls of Jesse's family, as if they were on the side of SEATER and the thing in the pit, they would only benefit from letting SEATER finish the work and bring Father to the pit. I also spent a lot of time wondering how Jesse encountered SEATER, but I'm not sure that there is an answer within the game. I'm also not 100% sure if the entity in the pit, and therefore SEATER, are specific to this location, as in, the reason that the pit was dug where it was is because there is a physical component to the ritual specific to that location, or if it could just be done anywhere. You just dig a pit anywhere and this'll work. If the former is the case, it's possible Jesse just got unlucky with where he built his house and encountered SEATER because of this. If it's the latter, I don't think we really have enough information to answer beyond just random chance. Okay, so we're just going to go from the top here and get my story straight for what I think is the lore of this game. Jesse is born into a family with his 2 parents and his older brother. At some point his parents separate, which is why he talks about going to Father's house and not just his house, and Jesse grows up slowly isolating himself from his family. As an adult, he moves out and meets Kate, who he eventually proposes to, but the relationship begins to break down and Jesse further isolates himself. He eventually begins to build his own house in the woods, and it's during this time that he encounters SEATER, who promises him that he can bring his family back together and fix his relationships if Jesse lets him into his head. As far as Jesse is concerned, life continues as normal. However, when he goes to sleep, SEATER takes control and begins to work on the massive subterranean complex we see in the game. He builds the factory room to manufacture metal bodies, which he can imbue into the souls of his victims, as well as building the stage room and digging out the pit for the purposes of a ritual to summon the entity. The first victim claimed is Jesse's old band teacher, possibly one of the only people he felt any connection to, as we can see him in the first seat in the room. Next up are Jesse's mother and brother. Over time, SEATER collects 19 of the 20 people he needs for the ritual, the final piece of the puzzle being father. We can see his seat in the back of the room. It's at this point when Jesse sees what's happening in the basement, possibly waking up while SEATER is working down there, and locks up the whole house before running away. As soon as Jesse falls asleep again, SEATER resumes control, drowning their body in the creek to ensure complete control before hunting down Jesse's father. It's possible that Jesse's father lived so far away that he wasn't able to get to him before Jesse awoke again, but with that no longer an issue, he was able to find him. Upon his return, we play as SEATER as he tries to gain access again to the basement, whilst all the souls contained within try to stop him. I would assume that Mother's MB was either destroyed by Jesse when he locked up the house or broke down naturally, but all we know is that by the time SEATER returns, Mother is skulking the house in the previously seated corpse, being the DSP which chases SEATER. Unfortunately, as we know, SEATER is ultimately successful in sacrificing Father, completing the ritual and summoning the entity. So that was Dead SEATER. I hope you enjoyed, I hope I didn't ramble too much, and I'd like to thank you for getting this far into the video. This wouldn't have been possible without my Ko-Fi supporters, so I'd like to thank every single one of them. Thank you Acrid Arsonist, Kobe Let's Key, Japamela, Greenest God, Watcher, There's a Bomb, Two Step SA, Nathan14321, Leo, Shrunk Hoovy, Dr. Ducklumps, Ulma, Ryan, Butter Water, Hack Guy, Crow, Mission, Libra the Gazebo, Dampire, Mig, Benjamin Gagney, Lula, Zach, Wapsdragon 3, Pro Moron, Hey1121, Justice, Michael Schoening, and The Fiendish.